Following World War II, which lasted from 1939 to 1945, the democratic United States and the Communist Soviet Union became engaged in various political and economic conflicts. These clashes between the countries became known as the Cold War. The intense rivalry raised concerns in the United States that communists and supporters of the Soviet Union were actively working in the United States as Soviet spies and were posing a threat to U.S. security. In 1950, fewer than 50,000 Americans out of a total U.S. population of 150 million were members of the Communist Party. Yet, as the Cold War intensified in the late 1940s and early 1950s, America's fear over the perceived threat caused by the potential communists in the United States reached near hysteria. This fear became known as the Red Scare, since communists were often referred to as Reds because of the red Soviet flag. The government began investigating millions of federal employees, asking what books they had read, what civic organizations they belonged to, and more. Hundreds of social workers, lawyers, teachers, and others lost their jobs because of their alleged political beliefs. Some libraries even pulled books from their shelves that were considered too leftist, such as Robin Hood and the Grapes of Wrath. This time period is often also called the McCarthy era, a name that comes from one of the most intense and famous anti-communists, Republican Senator of Wisconsin, Joseph McCarthy. Senator McCarthy spent almost 5 years trying to expose communists and left-wing supporters in the United States government. McCarthy's accusations were so intimidating that few people spoke against him. It was not until he attacked the U.S. Army in 1954 that his behavior earned him the censure of the United States Senate.
The space race began when the International Council of Scientific Unions decided to declare an International Geophysical Year from July 1st, 1957 to December 31st, 1958. Their intent was to encourage countries to study the increase in solar activity during this time period, but it began a competition between the U.S. and the Soviet Union to prove their scientific superiority. The first major accomplishment in the space race was the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik 1 on October 4th, 1957. About the size of a beach ball and 184 pounds, which is a little lighter than the average American male, it orbited the Earth in 100 minutes. A month later, on November 3rd, the USSR launched Sputnik 2, which was significantly heavier and even contained a dog named Laika. The United States panicked as it felt its superiority was being challenged. In response, they launched Explorer 1 on January 31st, 1958, which made many scientific contributions, most notably the discovery of Earth's magnetic radiation belts. Later, the U.S. government passed the National Aeronautics and Space Act of 1958, or simply the Space Act, which established a precedent for the researchful goal of the United States space program, after which the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, was established on October 1st, 1958. The next step for both countries was to get people in space. The Soviet Union won in that regard when Yuri Gagarin completed the world's first manned spaceflight on April 12, 1961. The United States responded when they launched Apollo 11 on July 16, 1969, the first success of many prior missions. On board were Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edwin Buzz Aldrin. Neil became the first man on the moon when he and Buzz explored and experimented on the moon's surface 4 days after launch. They left an American flag, which has since turned white due to the sun's radiation and has fallen over. They also left a sign, reading, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind."
Due to the fear of nuclear war during the standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union in the Cold War, many Americans created bomb shelters to try and protect themselves and their families from the worst-case scenario of a nuclear holocaust. The picture to the left is from a 1962 issue of Popular Science, prefacing an article about how to build one's own bomb shelter. The diagram in the bottom right corner is from 1961 and shows the reader where they should hide in the event of an atomic bomb being dropped. All of these precautions raise the question of, even if someone could survive the blast of an atomic bomb, would it be worth it if everything else was destroyed? The goal of a fallout shelter is to protect the people inside it from harmful gamma radiation released in the detonation of an atomic bomb. Concrete and lead are commonly used materials in shielding the occupants from this gamma radiation. Bomb shelters must also have air filters to filter the contaminated outside air into breathable air indoors. As far as location is concerned, Shelters are commonly found in basements of most buildings, but can also be built in the middle floor of buildings. Though construction of bomb shelters peaked during the Cold War, they are still around today. One example of this is the Sonnenberg Tunnel in Switzerland. It is designed to hold 20,000 people, and also includes amenities such as a theater and a post office. As you can see from the picture on the right, today it is used as a tunnel for automobiles. The picture on the left shows the blast door that would be sealed in the event of the detonation of an atomic bomb nearby. This thick wall would protect the occupants from the harmful radiation. Switzerland is still building bomb shelters at a high rate, which raises the question of whether or not they are necessary. To answer this question, Rod Serling, the creator of The Twilight Zone, said this: "If we survive, what do we survive for? What kind of a world? If it's rubble, and there's poison water and inedible food, and we have to live like wild beasts, I'm not sure I want to survive." Though the fear of a nuclear holocaust is not on the top of our minds today, it is still reassuring to know that in the event of such a disaster, we could have a place to hide.
Another aspect of the Cold War is the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a 13-day conflict in the October of 1962 between the Soviet Union and Cuba and the United States. Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, placed missiles in a Fidel Castro-run Cuba facing the United States and President John F. Kennedy. The crisis is generally regarded as the moment in which the Cold War came closest to turning into a nuclear conflict. During a meeting between Khrushchev and Fidel Castro that July, a secret agreement was reached and construction of several missile sites began in the late summer. Khrushchev tried to intimidate President Kennedy and the United States by claiming that they were churning out missiles like sausages. Although this accusation later proved to be false, Khrushchev debatably succeeded in intimidating President Kennedy. Many operations were ordered to get rid of Castro, but all attempts failed. This failure embarrassed not only President Kennedy, but the United States as a whole as well. They needed some way to turn the missiles away, because, as it was, they could reach almost anywhere in the country. Kennedy, feeling the pressure from his country, knew something had to be done. President Kennedy was never actually able to convince Khrushchev to take the missiles out of Cuba. However, when Mikhail Gorbachev assumed power of the Soviet Union in 1985, he implemented policies of glasnost and perestroika with the hopes of sparking the declining Soviet economy. The result of this window of freedom was the revolution that ultimately ended the Cold War.
Another major event during the Cold War was the trial of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. This trial was one of the most controversial trials of its time, and many people today think that the death penalty was largely unjustified. The severity of their crimes was said to be exaggerated because of the fear of the Soviet Union and the fear of communism. Julius Rosenberg was an active member of the Young Communist League, where he met his wife, Ethel Rosenberg. The Rosenbergs' brother-in-law, David Greenglass, was a scientist working on the then top-secret Manhattan Project, and after World War II, it was discovered that key documents had been leaked to the USSR through a network of spies, all leading back to Greenglass. Once Greenglass was accused, he then said that Julius had manipulated him into leaking the documents, and the Rosenbergs were sent to trial, where they were convicted of espionage and sentenced to death. After the trial, many people began protesting the sentence not only in the United States, but also across the world. Major people being Pablo Picasso, Albert Einstein, and even the current Pope. Labor unions organized strikes, and many countries condemned the United States decision. This death sentence is not surprising. It had to be. There had to be a Rosenberg case, because there had to be an intensification of the hysteria in America to make the Korean War acceptable to the American people. There had to be hysteria and a fear sent through America in order to get increased war budgets. And there had to be a dagger thrust in the heart of the left to tell them that you are no longer going to get 5 years for a Smith Act prosecution or 1 year for contempt of court, but we're going to kill you.